Hello, everyone. Lucia, welcome to Moonshot Conversations. I feel it is so true that our intention guides our attention, something that you said. I bought your book, this one. Can we all see it? The Power of Your Other Hand. I actually bought this when I was in Australia. And as I was doing research on our previous episode on creativity, it's like literally this book popped up in my head, even though it was sitting on my bookshelf. It was like this flashbulb moment, and suddenly I had to pick up your book and I started reading it, and I wrote to you straight away.
Wonderful.
Fantastic. Yeah, welcome, Lucia. Welcome to Moonshot Conversations. In fact, after our Moonshot Conversations last Sunday on creativity, I have been using my left non-dominant hand to brush my teeth. So we look forward to knowing more. Can you start by telling our corroboree a little about the brain and the hand connection?
Well, what I discovered in 1973 when I was struggling with a life-threatening illness and in therapy, I was introduced to writing with my non-dominant hand, the hand I don't normally write with. And as I did that, I regressed to being a young child, the way I felt when I learned how to write, because my non-dominant hand was very awkward. And then I did more research, and I found that there was a body of research about the right and left hemispheres of the brain, and that the right brain operates in a very different manner than the left brain. Left brain is logical, linear, it's very reasonable, it structures things, it loves to-do lists. And the right brain loves freewheeling, brainstorming, the arts, anything physical, recreational, fun, non-rational, and very emotional. It really carries our emotions, or it accesses them. So by using these two hands, I discovered I could access both sides of the brain, and I could also connect them. So I could let my left brain know what my right brain feels.
Wow. Do you think, Lucia, this is the reason why people love music so much? Because when you're actually listening to songs, you're working your left and your right brain together. I mean, your left processes the words and the
Yes.
right processes the music.
Yes, it's very integrative. I studied piano as a child. In fact, I was a child prodigy in music. I was composing music at an early age, and I played the piano, which involves both hands. And of course, there are many aspects of music that are very right brain. Now, reading music, they've tested that, is very much engaged with the left brain, because you've got a logical, linear, sequential thing that you're following. But improvisation, which I love, I'm a jazz fan. Improvisation is very right brain. Yeah. And of course, music has a lot of right brain. It's very physical and emotional. And the vibration of music is, really, it connects with the body. So it's and anything that's somatic, that's body-based, is going to be very right brain. Yeah.
So, Lucia, you narrate a story in your book about Herbert Ryman, the art director of Disney classics. Can you tell us about what Herbert discovered about the power of the other hand and how he used this with his animation artist?
Well, I met him when the book came out. I was working at Disney. I'd been there for 10 years as a consultant. And when the book came out, I was introduced to Herbie, and they said, you have to have lunch together and give him this book, and he's going to love it. And I said, why? Well, never mind. He'll tell you why. So when I gave him the book at lunch, he said, oh, I'm so glad you wrote this book. He said, I did this with the young artists when I was working on Fantasia. He said, we hired a whole bunch of artists, and they were all hotshots. Now they were at Disney, and they knew everything. And their artwork was very stiff, and they were creating characters that had no life in them and no personality. And he said, you can't animate a character unless you start with some personality. And so he went to Walt and complained, and Walt Disney said, do whatever you want. Stand them on their head if you have to, shake them up, loosen them up, do whatever you have to do. So he thought, well, I'm going to make them draw with their other hand. They hated it. They complained. They didn't want to do it. And he pulled rank. He just said, look, Walt told me to do whatever I want, and you're going to do it if you want a job here. So, all right, okay, they did it. Well, After they drew with their non-dominant hand, their artwork changed completely. And they started creating with their dominant hand characters that he could animate. So it turned the whole thing around. So he was very glad I wrote that book.
So what do you say to someone like Vinita Melvani, who's watching us, and she's saying, I did try brushing with my left hand and it was awkward and she found it difficult. What sort of words would you tell her to encourage her to sort of continue with the process?
Yeah, it is going to be awkward and difficult. And here's the thing. When you do something that you haven't done before, you're going to feel awkward. But that is stimulating areas of the brain because what you're doing is growing. All right. You are using parts of your brain you didn't use before. And that's what growth is. You know, you don't grow without opening up new areas of the brain. That's how it works. So if you stay in your comfort zone all the time, you will never grow emotionally, physically, or any otherwise. Okay. So we want to go to areas where we're going to be uncomfortable, but it's a safe kind of discomfort. We're not risking our lives or anything. We're not going to do anything crazy. We're just going to try something different, and we're going to work through that discomfort and live with it for a little while and feel what it's like. The same thing with writing and drawing with a non-dominant hand. When I do a workshop and I tell people they're going to do that, they go, oh, I can't do that. Or I draw with my non-dominant. I can't even draw with my dominant hand. I don't have any talent. I'm not artistic. And then I go, oh, all right, well, just try it. And once they do, their artistic ability starts to come out. Why? Because they're accessing the side of the brain that is the artist side. The right brain specializes in visual, spatial perception, emotional expression. That's the side of the brain you want when you're being creative. And so it opens that up, and boy, we're off to the races, because then they start to develop all this or discover talent they didn't know they had, and they end up drawing better with their non-dominant hand than they do with their dominant.
I know. Before Delara just steps in, because my dad, who's 85, is watching the show, and I want to understand: is it too late for my dad to be starting to do things with his non-dominant hand?
No, not at all. I had, as you know, I have a training program, and I train professionals to teach my work. And I had a woman who came into the training at 80. She was 80 years old, and she taught until her early 90s when she passed away. She was working at a class, teaching classes at a center in West Los Angeles in her 80s. Yeah, so it's never too late. And I really believe very strongly that this kind of work can prevent Alzheimer's and dementia and conditions of the brain that have to do, quote, with aging. I do not believe that aging of the brain is inevitable. I really do not. And I've seen people take to this work in their 70s and, late 70s, early 80s, and their whole life turns around. They start developing hobbies and, often getting involved in the arts. It's amazing to see it. Yeah.
Fantastic, Lucia. That was so interesting. Lucia, can you explain the special functions of each brain hemisphere?
Well, the left brain is designed for anything that has to do with predictability and structure and logic. So that side of the brain contains the two major language areas. Our ability to process language and so we can communicate and understand each other is the left brain process. If there's injury to that side of the brain or disease, often language will be impaired. So you will have something called aphasia. People will know what they want to say, but they can't say it. All right. They might not be able to read anymore. They won't be able to understand written language. That's all using rules and structure and grammar. All right. And we need that side of the brain. But we also need this other side of the brain that specializes in emotional expression, because it's connected to the limbic system, which is nestled deep inside the brain. And that part stores emotions. So, for instance, therapy is often about liberating our emotions. Well, if we're trying to do that from the left brain, it's going to take a long time because there is no, physiologically, there's no direct link from the left brain into the limbic system. There is no hallway, no window, nothing. If you want to get into the limbic system, you've got to go through the right brain. And so you get the emotions that are stored, and then you have the arts. And this is how I do it because I'm an expressive arts therapist. And we use the arts to get those emotions out in a safe way. And of course, I do that a lot with journaling, drawing and writing in a journal. Yeah, using both hands.
So I'm going to just, Divya Punjabi's asked a question, but I think you've already answered it. She's asking, is it too late to integrate both sides of the brain? She's 50 plus.
And this is exactly what my work does. And it's never too late. Again, I've had people at workshops in their early 90s, had never been exposed to this work before. They loved it. Just came in for one workshop, and then they've written me later, this is amazing. I feel so much freer and lighter, and I'm having more fun, and I feel less stressed. And when I get stressed, I scribble it out, because that's what I start with. I have people scribbling with their non-dominant hand and then with both hands together, which is very, very helpful in terms of integrating the hemispheres. Yeah.
So, Lucia, what are some of the structured activities our audience could do when keeping a personal growth journal? And how would these help them to be more creative, expressive, and intuitive?
Well, the first one is simply scribbling your any stress that you have or any discomfort in your body, any emotional stress, any mental stress, just scribble it out with your non-dominant hand, preferably with crayons and markers. You don't want to use pencils because they break. When you get really emotional as you're drawing, you want to be able to press really hard the way young children do. So we're going back to about age 3, okay? And we're finding our inner child, and we're just doing what we did in kindergarten or preschool. I was a Montessori teacher originally in my second career, so I know that this is developmentally taking us back to our inner child, to the way we were at 3 years old, scribbling on big pieces of paper. So we start in the journal by scribbling and warming up, and then really focusing on, well, what emotions, what stress do I have that I want to get out? What problems am I dealing with? Instead of trying to analyze it, let's just scribble it out. How do I feel about those bills that just came in that I can't pay today? Okay. Or how do I feel about my neighbor who just came down with COVID, which is true? How do I feel about that? All right. And then scribbling it out.
Early childhood teachers are taught to get the kids to cross their body midline a lot.
That's right.
And a lot of people like Bruce Lipton speak about it as well.
Right.
What sort of, how does that help?
It helps with the hemispheres. It helps to integrate them. And I do that by having people draw with both hands. And their hands will cross on the paper because they're freewheeling, and and I prefer, for really good brain integration, large pieces of paper like newsprint. You can use old newspapers. We're not making art here. This isn't expensive. All you need is crayons and maybe some markers, fat markers, and then you've got large pieces of newspaper, and you can just scribble on the newspaper. So it's not an expensive undertaking. And that drawing with both hands, I recommend doing it to music, because the music soothes the left brain, kind of lets it, it's sort of like chanting a mantra. The goal of chanting a mantra is to soothe the left brain and let it take a break. And that it just kind of puts it to sleep a little bit. And then you get into the right brain. And of course, the other thing I want to add is the right brain has our connection with spirituality. Not dogma, not left brain, texts or religion that you memorize, but the experience of the inner self, of the divine. And that is a right brain process. Without the right brain, you're not going to go there.
Fantastic. Lucia, can you talk to us about the inner self and how this inner self gets to speak when you use your non-dominant hand?
Well, I was in meditation training with Chudvalasananda, Gurmai that was visiting the United States in Los Angeles when I really discovered the meaning of the inner self. I knew it all along because I had found inner wisdom in my journal and I'd healed myself from a life-threatening illness. But when I studied with her and read her books and Muktananda's books, I understood that that inner self is really the self of all, but we all have access to it. And that inner wisdom can be accessed through the arts, through writing and drawing, and using the non-dominant hand to give a voice for that inner self. Because as I said, that connection is through the right brain. And so what I do is suggest to people, if you have a problem, write the problem down with your dominant hand and ask your inner self to give you the answer. And then put a pen in your non-dominant hand and let your inner self speak. And
Wow.
I know it'll be slow and awkward, but you will get the truth.
So Mandeep Narang, who's watching us live, said, it's quite interesting. I think she's looking for confirmation. I'm naturally right-handed, but my dad is left-handed. So as a child, I used to copy him a lot. So quite early in childhood, I deliberately started using my left hand. Even now, I use my left hand to eat and my right hand to write. Now I understand why I find it easy to balance out things, be logical, and still be creative.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. So I recommend people do things like you said, brushing your teeth. The things that you do every day with your dominant hand, wherever possible, try doing it with your non-dominant. But most importantly, drawing with both hands to music to relax, and then doing these dialogues. And the four magic questions, if you're dialoguing with a body part that's in stress or a problem in your life, maybe you're having a problem with your car, do a dialogue with it. So the four questions, I call it the four healing questions. What are you? How do you feel? Why do you feel that way? And what can I do to help you? So you're identifying what the problem is, and you're letting the non-dominant hand answer all those questions. So those four questions have been the most amazing tools for people to find the answers in themselves.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So, Tanuja's asking, when you use your non-dominant hand, are you more focused?
Yes, you're in the moment and you're in your body. You have to be, because it's difficult to do. You have to slow down. There's no question about it. You can't phone it in or go on automatic with your non-dominant hand because you just don't know how to do it. And even now, I've been doing this since 1973. My non-dominant hand is still awkward. Okay. Except when my inner self is writing. And then the handwriting changes and it gets very legible and very beautiful handwriting. Much better than when I'm printing or writing from my sore neck or having a dialogue with, an emotion or something like that. When my inner self speaks, the handwriting is quite elegant. It's beautiful. Yeah. And it goes into cursive writing instead of printing.
Fantastic. So, Lucia, how does journal drawing and writing help in self-discovery and healing?
Well, it's a place to take all of our stress and our problems and to empower ourselves to find the answers. Instead of running around looking at, reading books, talking to people, and it's not a substitute for therapy, but it's a wonderful adjunct to therapy. And it is a great life practice, just like meditation. It helps you calm down. I have never come away from a journal session of my own and not felt better afterwards. And I've been doing this for many years. I don't do it every day because I'm the type of personality that if you tell me I have to do something every day, I won't. So I don't even battle with that. I just do it when I feel like doing it. There are days when that's all I want to do is journal because things are very chaotic and crazy. And that's happened a lot in the last year, as you can imagine. And I have YouTube videos about this work applied to dealing with COVID at my YouTube channel under my name. And I've helped a lot of people get through some major crises this year. So I know that it's very helpful with health issues, physical health, because I have tools for dealing with that, with emotional stress, and also with relationships, because you can dialogue with another person and you write both sides. And that way you get to the heart of what are you doing? What's your perception that's creating the conflict in this relationship? And there's a whole chapter in the book, of course, on how you are with others, and dialoguing with others. And I have examples there about how people, including myself, have completely turned a relationship around by dialoguing with the other person and letting that other person's voice speak with your non-dominant hand. They don't even know about the dialogue. It doesn't matter. I believe that what you're doing when you do that is you're connecting with their higher self. And when the two higher selves connect, something happens at another level that shifts the relationship and brings love and understanding to it, and empathy in your own heart about the other person, because you get an insight into where the other person is coming from, because their ego's not involved. The truth of who they really are comes right through that your own non-dominant hand.
I'm going to try it straight after the show, Lucia.
Yeah.
So, Lucia, in your book, you speak about Benjamin Franklin, the gentleman who was the statesman, philosopher, author, and inventor. In fact, he was a proponent of education for both hands.
Yes.
How do you feel children may benefit if we actually ran an education system for both hands?
Well, I've done it. We've done it in a school system in Texas. We brought the journal into almost every school in the district. There were like 20 schools, pre-K through age 12, grade 12. And we also did research in another school district, and the results were threefold. Number one, academic gains. Okay, so their grades got better. All right. Number two, emotional gains. Their behavior in the classroom was better. They could focus better. Their social interactions improved. All right. And the third gain in our last research a few years ago in Texas, in the Edinburgh district, was that on testing day, there were no children with physical symptoms of stress and test anxiety in the nurse's office. And that in the United States, that's an epidemic. On testing day, at all levels of education, students get very stressed out. And they had been journaling about the tests before, for 2 or 3 days before the tests. So when test day came, they just sat down and did their testing. They weren't anxious anymore. They'd already gotten that out of their system. And the nurse said, she called around the district. It's the largest district in the United States, school district, geographically. She called around to see, do you have an empty office today? It's testing day. There's nobody in my office. And they all said, you're being ridiculous. Of course we have, our offices are full of kids. They're throwing up. They have fevers. They have diarrhea. Of course, this is every time we have standard tests. Why are you asking that question? And this nurse said, we don't have any in our school. Well, that was the only school in the district that had our program.
So apart from...
I have results.
So apart from specifically journaling, and this is Divya's question actually, should we encourage children to be ambidextrous?
Not necessarily, no. I don't believe that we will be ambidextrous necessarily with this work. What we will be doing, though, is using both sides of the brain for what each side of the brain is designed to do. I'm not asking people to write with their non-dominant hand as well as they write with their dominant. That's not what I'm proposing. I'm saying they're going to be different, and it's not a bad idea to have one hand that accesses awkwardness, because as I said, if you're feeling awkward, you're growing, okay? If both hands know exactly what they're doing all the time, you've lost that inner child and that access to that sense of vulnerability. That's what that sense of vulnerability is connected to our empathy. You know, if all you value is strength and power and control, you're in trouble. And then you're dealing with fascism, literally. Yeah. psychological fascism and political fascism. We have to make space for vulnerability, for empathy, for the soft side of humanity. And our world is desperately in need of that right now. And our schools are desperately in need of it. Our children need to be taught this, that we have to value the spiritual side, the creative side, the emotional side. And we know that in this world we're in, if we don't train in flexibility and creativity, we are not going to survive. The world that our children are coming into, yes, it's technical. We've got high tech, but we've also got to have what Nesbitt called high touch. Okay? That's the soft arts. That's the humanity side and the spiritual side. If we don't get a handle on that, we're not going to be around to even talk about it.
Excellent. Lucia, Daniel Pink has written a book called Why Right Brainers Will Rule the World.
Right.
In fact, on the 3rd of January, we had Sally and De La Casa impress upon us that moving forward, we will need more human skills like creativity and empathy. Yeah. So what do you feel, Lucia, that parents and educators could do that we develop more right brainers?
Well, keeping a journal using my methods. And I have a book for children. It's actually written for adults, working with children from pre-K to about the end of the grammar school, elementary school level. And then I've got books for middle school and for high school. And I have a book for parents for themselves, the Creative Journal for Parents. I have a whole series of books called the Creative Journal. So children, for teens, for parents. And if the whole family is, see, you can't take anybody where you haven't been. So to ask parents to guide their children in journaling, and they've never kept a journal and they don't know the value of it, and they haven't used their non-dominant hand, they don't know the value of that, or drawing in a journal, that's rather hypocritical. So I wrote the book for parents because I want them to do this for themselves. About their parenting process, because so many parents are confused about parenting. They may not want to parent their children the way they were parented, or we're living in a different world than we grew up in. So we have to adapt, and we have to take the lead from what do these children need? But we've got to process our own stuff with our own journaling. So that's why I have books for the whole family. Cradle to grave.
So, Lucia, all the links and information is available for our corroboree in the journal. They'll download the journal at the end of the session and get all of that information.
Great. And we're talking about making these books available through your outlet. So we'll definitely do that. And I'll be sending you these the ebooks for the whole family.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lucia. Lucia, what could we all do for ourselves and for our children to becoming more authentic, truer versions of who we are, who we really are, in fact?
I think the basic exercise in my journal book, the Creative Journal, and also in this Power View of the Hand, and that is, as often as possible, sit down and ask yourself, how do I feel right now? And then if there's upset connected with that, and what do I want? The other one is to ask and draw and write it in your journal. What is my true heart's desire? And do that as a regular basis about any decision you have to make. What is my true heart's desire about this decision? And I say do it every day with the things you choose to wear, what you have for breakfast. Every little choice you make, you can use that as the mantra is, what is my heart's desire about this decision I'm making, this choice? And that prepares us for an authentic life.
You know what I find fascinating is that you've got this depth of information, and in the area of neuroscience, we're barely just scratching the surface. So, the secrets of the mind and are just astounding.
Yeah, it's true. It's an exciting time to be alive. We have a lot of challenges, but we've also got a lot of tools.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Lucia, what are the three most human transformational stories you can tell us that have specifically come through the power of your work?
Okay. My own story is that I healed myself from what was later diagnosed as a lupus-related collagen disease. Collagen is a substance that is like the glue that holds everything together. And the man who diagnosed me later, after I was completely healed, did iridology and sclerology. And he looked in my eyes and he read the bottoms of my feet, trained in Chinese medicine. And he said, "What happened when you were 35?" It was like reading the rings on a tree, right? And he could tell, he read my health history from childhood on, what age, what I had. So I knew he knew what we was doing. I thought he was psychic, but he was reading my eyes. And he said, "What happened when you were 35? Did you come unglued?" And my jaw dropped open. I said, "How did you know that? Are you psychic?" "No, no, no." He said, "I can tell in your eyes." And then he said, "Did you know what you had?" And I said, "No." He said, "Because you don't have it anymore." And he told me what I had. And I said, "Well, that makes total sense." Because a lot of pictures in my journal were of things falling apart and me falling apart and coming unhinged, from the joints. I mean, just cracks in the earth, all of that. Yeah. So and I healed myself from that condition. The other very dramatic story, which is in The Power of Your Other Hand, is Pamela, who did a dialogue with her sinuses because she had chronic sinus congestion from the time she was 5, and she was 35 at the time. She cleared it completely with one dialogue. And in that dialogue, she started to cry. And with her non-dominant hand, she said, "I want my mommy," she wrote. And it turned out she was 5 years old when her parents got a divorce, left her to live with her grandparents, and that's when the chronic sinus congestion started. Why? Her grandmother told her, "Be a brave little girl, Pamela, don't cry." So she didn't cry. She stored all the tears in her sinus, and she had sinus congestion for 30 years. And it went away after one dialogue. I stayed in touch. She's passed away. I've stayed in touch with her over the years, never had sinus problems after that.
Wow.
The most dramatic case is one of my graduates was working with a young girl who had a vaccine and it was contaminated, and as an infant became brain injured. She could not talk and she could not coordinate her muscles. And she was now about 11 or 12 years old. So my student, her name is Hoodie, went in with her own journal, decided to try to communicate with her non-dominant hand. She sat down with this young girl, never met her before, and started writing with her own non-dominant hand. And the words that came out were, "If you think this is you writing this, then this will never work." And those were the thoughts she had in her mind when she sat down to work with this girl, because she thought, "I'm just going to be making this up. It's not really going to be this young girl's thoughts."
Wow.
And then she went on to write down, "I know that my family is very frustrated and they don't know what to do with me. I can't control my body. I can't control my emotions. And I know I have outbursts and I don't know what to do about it. And I feel so helpless." And she went on and wrote that. And then she read it back to this girl. And the girl is smiling and shaking her head. After my student went home, Hoodie, the mother called and said, "Our daughter said a word for the first time, 11 years old. It was your name. You must come back and work with her again."
Wow.
Well, absolutely.
And I met that young girl. She still can't talk normally, but she has controlled her emotions. She can function fairly well. She went to a wedding just before I met her and actually danced at the wedding in her own way and was able to behave. They never could have taken her to a social event like that before, ever, ever. Her family was in tears thanking me. This has absolutely changed this young woman's life, this girl.
So very quickly, everyone's so blown away with the wealth of information you have, Lucia. Divya is just saying thank you. Vinita saying lovely. Girija saying deep. Amol saying amazing. Tanuja saying superb. Ravi saying amazing. Sonali saying mind blowing. it's a mind-blowing experience to hear you, Lucia. Vinita saying amazing session, Lucia. Everyone's just like I think everyone's just had such a wonderful, wonderful time.
Well, and I want to thank you because I owe India a great debt because my spiritual teacher is from Ganeshpuri, and my life was changed completely when I met her and her guru. And I have such great reverence for Indian culture and religion and spirituality. And I can't tell you how grateful I am to be paying back to India what India has given me. Thank you.
Awesome. You were flawless and absolutely smooth flowing forward. That was a fantastic session, Lucia. Ganeshpuri is just 80 kilometers from where me and Lina are sitting at the moment in Mumbai. So we are very close to the place that you are so much highly speaking about. And it's indeed a pleasure and a privilege to have you on Moonshot Conversations. And the audience, our corroboree, has just enjoyed every piece of knowledge, your wise words of wisdom which you shared. And I'm sure this video is going to be there perpetually, from which people will benefit a lot forever. Thank you so much, Lucia. And thank you for speaking to the Indian audience as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lucia.